Hello and welcome back to Podcasting as Praxis. I'm David, my pronouns are he and him.
I'm James, my pronouns are they and them.
I'm Jamie, my pronouns are he and him.
And I'm Alasdair, and my pronouns are also he and him.
Rob is away this week, lucky him. And,
yeah. He's in Britain, so maybe not.
And they won't let him leave.
He's stuck. This is actually true, listener. He was, last I heard, stuck at the world's largest automated baggage carousel. So, yeah, great.
Which is glitched and stopped working.
Yeah.
Wait, was it the carousel that was automated? Is that the whole point? Because I thought all of them were automated unless there's just a series of guys underneath that conveyor belt.
No, it was automated baggage drop-off.
Yeah.
Yeah, it includes the back end to it.
It's automated. Okay. It's automated when you get your bag back, but you normally have to give it to some fucking goon by hand, don't you?
So like this, a lot of people think the carousel is just a bit of a bomb. It's not. There's actually this whole back end system to it as well that you don't see behind the flaps.
Yeah, we've all seen Toy Story.
Is that in Toy Story? It's been years since I've seen that film.
My reference for it was Die Hard 2, to be fair.
Yeah.
It might be Toy Story 2, actually, but I don't care.
What is it about second films and baggage carousels?
I think it's just the two films, actually.
No, there was that bit in Empire Strikes Back.
There's a carousel in Return of the Jedi, so...
I'm Googling Wikipedia luggage carousel and seeing what comes up. Baggage robo on the Wikipedia. Okay, let's learn more about this.
I hope Wikipedia features every week.
The baggage robo was a droid often found in spaceports. These automatons could be hired to carry one's luggage from terminal to terminal. Well, now we all know.
Yeah. I have this little game that I played recently after becoming more aware of Wikipedia, which is Wikipedia groaning, where you look up an article on a legitimately famous person in real life, and then look up the article on, say, Han Solo on Wikipedia and compare the length. It's a bit like I don't understand who has the time and energy and will to produce something like that about all of the fake bullshit.
Do I need to show you the and all notes document again?
Yeah, and you didn't have like thousands of collaborators. So
it's true.
Have you noticed by the way, Alasdair, that Wikipedia is actually divided in two? There's like the official canon, and then there's the extended universe that got destroyed, and they've separated it into 2 pages for every single entry.
Separate but equal.
Yeah. So since Rob is away tonight, it falls on someone else to do a bit of a deep dive, and this episode we're going to be talking...
Everyone just immediately screamed, not it, but James did it slow.
Yeah.
I don't remember being asked, actually.
No, everyone just started touching their noses, Jamie, and you just did it on reflex.
Yeah, I was slowest to do it, and it was a honking sound as a consequence.
James being like, why is everyone touching their noses?
So yeah, we're gonna cover the SAG-AFTRA and WGA strikes. But before we get to that, I've got some news nuggets for you all. So, I regret to inform you. We talked a little bit about this wave of shoplifting that was in the US and how it was coming over to the UK, and we were saying it's cool and good actually.
Mm-hmm. Crime is down, but fear of crime is rising. Gotcha.
Basically, yes. As it turns out, clarification, and this is thanks to Raphael Shimonov, who hosts a podcast elsewhere. He was writing about this on Twitter at length by way of the Los Angeles Times. Basically, the whole shoplifting crisis was completely manufactured by police and repeated with zero fact-checking by press.
Well, I mean, that is something that we've imported here. Just look at the Notting Hill Carnival shit that's gone down as a result of the last weekend, and again, what happened at exactly the same time last year.
Yeah. I think the fucking pirate raid on like Debenhams or whatever the fuck it was that went. That actually happened though, didn't it?
Yeah, no, this is the thing. There have been a couple of raids, but it's only been like a couple. So, Raphael took the time to go through the shocking numbers they cited, which are all lies, to be clear, and we'll get to that. He worked out that it translated to 7 cents per $100 in losses. That's what we're talking about. That's the Great Wave. 7 cents per $100.
But those are my 7 cents, motherfucker. Give them back.
Where else are they meant to find those profits?
I know.
Well, so courtesy of the Los Angeles Times, that would mean retail gangs steal nearly 25% of total sales in San Francisco and Oakland combined, which amounted to around $15.5 billion in 2019, according to the state agency that tracks sales tax.
Wow, that sure is a terrifying number. I wonder if it's real.
Can that be right? In a word, no. The country's largest retail industry group, the National Retail Federation, estimated in its latest report that losses from organised retail theft average $700,000 per $1 billion in sales, or about 0.07% of total sales, which is about 330.
They should have called that the National Retail Association and then gone to bat for everyone who wants to conceal carry a pricing gun.
But yeah, so
this is an open carry state, Jamie.
But yeah, that's about 330 times lower than the estimate that was given out. And so, there was even a bit where they confronted the group, again from the Los Angeles Times. Asked how the organisation arrived at that figure, a CRA staffer said that there's no way of knowing exactly how much organised retail crime affects the bottom line of businesses. The staffer said the estimate was based on a back-of-the-napkin calculation.
So it's exactly like estimating the billions of lost revenue as a result of piracy, then.
Yep. If organised retail thieves steal $70 billion annually, and California accounts for 10% of California's losses add up to $7 billion, meaning the Bay Area is likely in the billions itself. That's the logic they're using to put this together.
I mean, to be fair, it is very difficult because these people are going in and just stealing intellectual property, which, as we know, cannot be taken inventory of. So it's impossible to say.
You wouldn't download Nike or whatever. What's great about it is they also have been on the record and lied to Congress about this.
Everyone does that, though. I think it's legal.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Don't say that as if there's consequences behind it.
Yeah, I think you stand out more if you don't.
Yeah.
So again, from the Los Angeles Times, lying to Congress, which should, in theory, have consequences under oath. When asked where that number came from, Rich Rossman, Vice President of CLEAR and Sergeant with the Broward County Sheriff's Office, said that it was pulled from the National Retail Federation's report. But the NRF puts all losses to theft and fraud from all sources at around $45 billion, not losses to organised retail crime. So all losses are $45 billion. Organised retail crime is, substantially smaller than that, and yet they just took the major figure, and said, "Oh, that's all organised crime." Horseshit.
What do they expect? Like, organising shit's fucking hard. Like, you're not going to do organised crime of retail theft at any large scale because it's just fucking effort.
Yeah, it sounds like all these criminals need to read more theory.
Yeah. Well, that might explain why it's actually shrinking. Get it? Like, the actual organised crime and retail thefts are shrinking. And a majority of portion of it doesn't actually come from actual crime. It's just that stats are misreported. So get this. Although the NRF publishes its organised retail crime estimates every year, the group stopped publishing a detailed breakdown of the sources of shrink in 2019. Interesting. But in 2018, a survey found that 35.7% of shrink came from shoplifting or organised retail crime, and 33.2% came from employee theft. Both percentages had declined since 2015, and a different sort of risk, paperwork error, hit 18.8% of total shrink in 2018. So they're actually losing more than half of what they're losing to, say, employee theft is just coming from paperwork error.
Paperwork error means the management are now at the theft.
Quite possibly, actually. Not even a joke. It's all horseshit, and it's all been gymmed up to, again, arm the police. And we're not denying that there are, occasional organised raids taking place, but it is not the fucking sweeping epidemic that it's being made out to be, not by a long shot.
So pull your fucking fingers out.
Yeah, I would encourage them to go further.
But I thought it'd be interesting to compare and contrast this with actual routine business fraud in the USA. And I've got a hell of a story here. This is from the Washington Post. And it's about a company called, and I'm really not making this up, Booz Allen Hamilton. And how they
Booz
essentially...
Allen Hamilton, and why is he being booed?
Yeah. Is that booze or booze?
It's booze.
BOOZ.
Sword.
Yeah. Well, now I feel foolish.
So this is a story about a whistleblower who may not be entirely altruistic, and we'll get to that in a later point. Only a few months into a new finance job, Sarah Feinberg felt stunned when a senior manager with a Northern Virginia-based defense contractor called federal auditors too stupid to notice overcharging, according to a federal complaint she filed. Feinberg said she had warned the manager that the company, Booz Allen Hamilton, was losing tens of millions of dollars and, in her view, billing more than it should on US government contracts to cover the losses. During the ensuing 9 months, she repeatedly raised concerns with senior executives, including internal compliance officials and the chief financial officer, according to a 37-page civil complaint she filed against Booz Allen in 2016 under the Federal False Claims Acts. In July...
Like this the almost like subtext of this of like both the US government and her bosses are just like, we know, stop going on about it.
Well, get to this, right? In July, the Justice Department, which investigated her complaint, announced that Booz Allen had agreed to pay $377 million, $209 million in restitution to the federal government and the rest in penalties to settle the matter, one of the largest awards in a government procurement case in history. Feinberg, who said she felt vindicated and was to receive nearly $70 million for making the case known to authorities, nevertheless could not help feel doubts about whether justice was served. So, there's this whole thing in the US where you can file I believe this is pronounced qui tam lawsuit, in which whistleblowers are awarded a portion of any financial judgment or settlement as incentive to come forward with evidence of fraud against the US government. So basically, if you're at a company and a company's ripping them off by, say, $200 million, if you report it to the US government and evidence it and they get a judgment against them, you can walk away with a fat paycheck, which is
nice.
Kind of cool. But, at the same time, one wonders, would this have been reported if not for that, little kind of statute?
Well, that's surely why the incentive's there.
I suppose. The system dates back to the Civil War, ironically, when authorities sought to root out corruption in the production of war materials. The number of whistleblowers has grown significantly since Congress strengthened the law in 1986.
Nothing new under the old sun.
Yeah, but would you believe? So I'm saying that this is routine, but this is just one case. Surely, here's the thing: as the article goes on to say, according to federal data, 652 people have filed these complaints just last year. And the Justice Department has recovered $2.2 billion in false claims by companies from about 351 of those cases. And this is the second highest number of cases ever. It's just increasing year on year. And
very anti-business of them.
I know, right? What's interesting, though, is this has led, and I just love this paragraph, because remember, this is the Washington Post, right? Legal analysts have questioned whether the system has been effective in delivering a strong enough message of deterrence to companies that operate within the federal government's vast contracting network. In civil cases, they say companies are rarely required to admit liability, senior executives often do not face personal accountability, and investors typically react with a shrug, sometimes pushing stock prices higher because the legal cloud is lifted. But yeah, that's it. There's no consequences to any of this. If you get caught, then you have to pay restitution and a fine. That's it.
Rip.
Compared to if you are done for shoplifting in the United States, say, as part of a raid group, in which case you'll do actual prison time for far less money, as we've just gone over.
The Washington Post is the Jeff Bezos paper, isn't it?
It is, and you're correct that Jeff Bezos is also involved in, the support of the US military through his massive, tentacle-equipped, system that is Amazon web hosting, etc.
Yeah.
It's just interesting to have that little bit of editorial, is this even effective? But yeah, so there you go. For all that shit's made up when it comes to raiding shops, the actual routine corruption by big business is very, very alive and well, and no one cares. No one fucking cares.
Yeah.
The only time anyone cares is when there's a paycheck to be made out of it.
Everyone just looks down and says bottom text.
But let me reassure you that this routine corruption is not confined to the United States, because, taking us back here to the UK, would it surprise you to know that there is also a significant amount of corruption over here of a slightly different form?
Are you for
Pikachu.
real? So I'm just going to read you this short article from The Telegraph. bidding war for Labour insiders as City prepares for red shift. With Starmer expected to sweep to power, businesses are jostling for the party's top talent.
Sorry, I couldn't let you finish that sentence before I started laughing.
Fuck out of here.
Could you say that again?
The title is Bidding War for Labour Insiders as City Prepares for Red Shift. With Starmer expected to sweep to power, businesses are jostling for the party's top talent.
Fucking red shift because he's receding away so quickly.
But yeah, so the article's about how basically naked corruption is taking place, and everyone's just like, oh, this is normal, this is fine.
Yeah,
it's the good kind of corruption, so
yeah, exactly.
It's Britain, it's entirely normal.
After 13 years of Tory government, business leaders are facing up to the fact that a new party may be in Downing Street next year, one that many have no experience of working with. With Labour enjoying... With Labour enjoying a 17-point lead over the Tories, Sir Keir Starmer looks increasingly likely to sweep to power. That prospect is sparking a scramble to figure out how to deal with the government in waiting. Public affairs and comms consultancies are getting CEOs asking them, what are we doing in preparation for this potential change? Do we have the right contacts and connections? Says Lucy Cairncross, Managing Director at VMA Group, a recruiter that specialises in public affairs. And yeah, so they're basically PR firms and city advisors are rushing to hire current or former Labour insiders who know how the party works and can help get things done.
Is this actually happening, or are the Labour insiders rushing to them? With that, like,
no, it's genuinely it's genuinely this way around. This is so the subtext to this article is that access to government of one form or another is like the lifeblood that major companies in the UK run on, essentially. And they're now having to go, oh shit, we actually have to care about access to labour again. Like, you know, it's not just enough to turn up to one of their fundraising dinners to like keep our poker in the fire. Now we actually need a man or a woman, probably a man given how sexist it all is, who can get us access to, like, if we want to sit down with Rachel Reeves or whatever, then we need someone who can make that happen for us. This is real. This genuinely happens with government shifts across the world. It's just how business does this shit.
Right, but are they all this dumb to think that a Labour government will happen? Is this fucking Londo Malari Inc. saying, do you know what, we should deal with the shadow government?
It's like they are genuinely this dumb, yes, is the short version. Because you got to remember, David, like most people in business don't actually spend their day paying that close attention to, like, you know, electoral prospects.
No, obviously, people who work in business are dickheads who post in LinkedIn all day. I've seen that they post, like...
So they can be forgiven for not knowing that, like, nothing is going to change.
Well, so the interesting thing is, like, I'm with you guys. I don't think, like, Labour's going to get elected for reasons we've gone over. But even if it does, even if they do get in, nothing will change for us. But it might change depending on who's got access on the inside.
How dare you impeach the fine abilities of Keir Starmer? Things would get worse.
Yeah, all right, fair. Misspoke there. But for real, like, so if you are, let's say you are a pencil supplier to the civil service, right? And it's the decision for
let me get into character.
Like,
James is going to need an hour. Sorry, me back at 9 o'clock.
How is that, like, you know, the particulars of how that contract is awarded, like, there'll be all sorts of rules on independence, etc. But at the end of the day, there is a fair bit of pressure can be exerted by government to decide who gets the pencils contract or whatever. And if the government changes and you no longer got your contacts, one of your competitors might well get that grift.
Well,
and this is what it's all about.
That's why you make sure all the contracts are signed for like 40 years and they have to give you fucking whales if they go back on it or something.
I mean, they do kind of do that a bit, but there's always new stuff.
They give whales to a pencil contractor.
Why not?
Well, I mean, the metaphorical weight of a whale in, you know, British sterling, maybe. But there's also, like, I mean, you know, there's also just new shit comes up. Well, I mean, there's new shit comes up all the time. Like, I mean, the whole, you know, COVID crisis, we all saw very nakedly what happens when a government gets free rein to basically award its contracts for that. And everyone wants to be on the inside, on the take when that happens. And so now they're scrambling because they want to be on the inside when Labour is in charge.
What these businesses are about to learn is that they need to have some extraordinarily odious right-wing views. Otherwise, Luke Hay-Kirsty's going to, like, just ban them from the entirety of Britain.
I have a theory that if Labour gets into power, they might actually just ditch Akehurst because he'll have outlived his usefulness. But that's a whole other story.
I feel like that little prick is way more instrumental to the machinations of the party than fucking Keir Starmer is. So, like, fat chance of that.
Yeah, but we can all hope
see.
he like walks under a bus or something.
So, reading from the article, every business and every trade body in the country is making a contingency plan at the moment for a Labour government. It is an increasingly expensive procedure. There is a shortage of talent, meaning companies must pay a premium to attract those with real insight.
Are they talking about Labour? Because, correct, there is a shortage of talent. That is absolutely fucking true.
They're not even meaning competence, but just meaning people who know, right, who's the person I need to ring up in order to get this to happen. So
Wes Streeton knows his way about a fucking photocopier.
Well, I want to read you this next bit.
I imagine, though, the answer to who do I ring about this is Keir Starmer. Like, he has the energy of someone who will absolutely answer the phone at any fucking hour.
I was just about to head out to the Arsenal game.
Note for the editor to speed that section up.
Okay, I'm going to read you these paragraphs because you'll enjoy this. Labour has been out of power for more than a decade, and many of those who worked under the party's last leader have been written off. There aren't that many credible people from the Corbyn period because so many of them were avowedly anti-business. And of course, it's a long time since Labour were in government. So there aren't that many Labour advisors who have government experience, says Nick King, managing director of Hendham Strategy.
Yeah, once again, Jeremy Corbyn's biggest crime is derailing the horrendous fucking career paths of the most annoying fucking people in government. Oh, I was in fucking Labour students in 1992, and so I should be an MP between 2015 and 2017, so that I can get a nice plush position in the fucking water industry, so that so that I can facilitate private money moving around near and about the Labour Party.
Alasdair, I love you because you've set this up beautifully. Former MPs are in particular demand. Luciana Berger, who quit Labour in protest in 2019 before later rejoining briefly, joined in-house communications last year and became a senior advisor this summer. Anna Turley, who served in Corbyn's shadow cabinet, has joined Arden Strategies, as has the party's former head of business relations, Ellie Miller.
Got him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, they just straight up said right then and there that fucking Corbyn wasn't corrupt. Like, the people under him, for the most part, weren't really corrupt, and so we can't go to them.
See, I would have thought that the biggest problem here with Corbyn and these, like, consultancy jobs was that he sped up the pace of employment too quickly. Like, I don't see any of them going for the gambling industry at this point, and presumably it's because they've had to turn around and say fuck off for full. We've had 15 years worth of MPs join us in 5.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So, but a current Labour source says, I get some kind of call probably once a month. It started last year when the Tories began to properly implode. And yeah, so it's really like
but
right now...
it's just Ian Austin doing that one phone call.
But yeah, no, it's really like they're predicting that if it becomes a dead certain thing, then it's going to be like hell forever, and just they're going to be showering Labour insiders.
Now is the hour of Chucker.
Yes, unironically, like that's what this shit is. Demand for Labour expertise.
The British Obama finally gets to play Kingmaker.
I wouldn't stretch it that far, but
Chucker would though. So
yeah, he would. Demand for Labour expertise is strongest in finance, tech, and net zero adjacent industries. Any industry that's under particular pressure from a net zero agenda, they are absolutely trying to talk themselves into a position where they can get their, hooks into an ex-government, essentially. It's just straight up, like, they know that net zero is going to hurt their pockets, so they want to get in.
The reason they need the insiders from the pre-Corbyn and post-Corbyn years is so that they can just have their wallets stroked in the safe knowledge that nothing will change for them.
Yeah.
Like BP and Shell are still going to be drilling thousands of barrels a second out of the fucking earth, and they're going to be doing their fucking PR for green energy just because that's what they have to do in order to continue drilling the thousands of barrels a second or whatever, and nothing of material significance will change. So mission accomplished, everyone.
They really want to have their wallets inspected, but they want to hand them over to the only people who would seriously actually do wallet inspection totally straight.
I think they want to basically hand over their wallets and get them back with more cash in them, which is a very Labour thing to do. But they're straight up, they're nakedly honest at the end of this article. To finish it off, then you get very large employers who are asking, what is Labour going to do on employment rights and taxation for large companies? Labour are happy to answer these questions. When Starmer launched
it starts.
When Starmer launched his prawn cocktail offensive 2.0 last summer, it marked the second phase of a long push to...
Full fucking box of Walker's crisps.
It marked the second phase of a long push to try and woo business to the left. Capital L on left, by the way.
It wouldn't be Walkers, it would be Skips, because they immediately melt.
That was really good. I enjoy that. The first phase was basically decontamination, trying to convince people that the party is no longer Jeremy Corbyn, says Ward. The second phase is carpet bombing, meeting every business or anyone who will meet you. That is what they are doing now and what they've been doing for the last year or so.
I bet you can't wait to get a fucking shot of some carpet bombing.
The third phase will be a calculated, targeted programme of engagement with a much smaller group of businesses that Labour can trust, he says. As the circle gets smaller and the election draws nearer, the value of insiders will only go up. That's it. That's how government works, everyone.
Yeah, we should all buy shares in Wes fucking Street.
Everyone, go down to your local McDonald's, buy a Happy Meal, and keep the toy under your bed. In 5 years, that toy will be worth tens of pounds.
Like, this is the thing. If you could put stock in politicians, then it wouldn't actually be a bad
Rishi
shout.
Sunak.
Yeah, like, basically, for multiple reasons. This is how it works. It's all about who do you have access with, and it's all just bought and paid for. And remember, the companies aren't doing this just because they like a chat. They're doing this because they want to directly influence policy in a direction that will benefit them and fuck everyone else. Which might be, you might be thinking, well, okay, the government's changing, I suppose this makes sense, but would it surprise you to know, for our final news nugget, that it doesn't just happen around election times, that it's in fact an ongoing process that goes across both parties? No. Well, I've got an article from The Guardian.
Oh no, it's not Polly, is it?
Is that supposed to fucking fill me with confidence?
It's not Rafa either, is it?
This is Rowena Mason, the Whitehall editor, right? And this isn't, these opinions are terrible. This is like some actual factual reporting. More than 100 MPs received freebies worth 180,000 this summer. Exclusive, Oliver Dowden and Keir Starmer among those who enjoyed free tickets to events including the Chelsea Flower Show and the Derby. But yeah, more than 100 MPs have enjoyed free hospitality to concerts and sporting events worth more than 180,000 this summer, with tickets given away by banks, oil companies, the gambling industry, there you go, David, and media firms. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, the Deputy Prime Minister, Oliver Dowden, and the Labour leader, Keir Starmer, are among those who have benefited from a growing trend for politicians accepting giveaways.
A growing trend, is it?
Yeah,
are we noticing things again?
We're noticing things again. Critics said the free tickets could leave MPs open to influence from the companies providing benefits, and questioned whether it was appropriate in a cost of living crisis to be taking thousands of pounds in hospitality
Homer Simpson
not
with the
available
toy
to
oven in
ordinary
the car,
members.
like that's what I bought it for.
Several ministers have been hosted for nothing by companies. Hunt was taken to the Chelsea Flower Show by Lloyds Banking Group in a benefit worth more than £600, as well as accepting theatre and opera tickets. Paul Scully, a science and technology minister, accepted £1,100 worth of tickets to Billy Joel concert from the Betting and Gaming Council. And Wimbledon hospitality...
I mean, this is the most fucking outrageous thing about all of this, right? In America, you get, like, an entire fucking industry built in your state or whatever. Here, it's a fucking £600 ticket.
Yeah, at least in the US, they build a baby killing factory that supplies some jobs. Like, here, some cunt gets to go to a fucking
At least in pork barreling, you get a pork barrel out of it.
Yeah. Like, you're actually... Sort of, Alasdair, you're close. There's two separate things going on in the States. Pork barreling is when they're trying to get legislation through Congress, and so they give everyone a bit of everything and pile the pork into the barrel in order to get it through. What you're thinking of is, in the US, they do donations to political action committees. So a company will come along and they'll say, I tell you what, I will donate $500,000 to your political action committee's re-election fund. Now, you can't spend that. That's not money that goes straight into your pocket. But what happens is your family and friends, etc., are beneficiaries of salaries from another political action committee in your network. And so you get the money in a roundabout way. It's like everyone scratches each other's backs, and that's how they get away around the brown bag.
Which one of these systems does it fall under when you get to listen to Piano Man immorally?
Well, this is the thing. It's like the British one is just so low rent. Alasdair is correct. Like, we
used to be a real country, you know?
Well, this is like, actually, to be depressing for a second, part of the reason it's so much cheaper is because Britain matters so much less, you know? It really is that simple. The article does go on to say, though, that the total of 180,000 to hospitality since late May could be an underestimate, for example.
Oh, yeah, because I assume this is just from stuff that's in the registered interest, right? Because, the amount of shit that just doesn't go in there because they can fucking get away with it. Because,
oh, yeah.
I remember fucking Hislop and one of the other guys from there were doing a thing in, this is last year or whatever, and they were just saying how fucking difficult it is to actually go through the registered interests of all the MPs, because it's just impenetrable. And this is the stuff that's actually in there, right?
This year, a Tory MP, Scott Benton, amazing name for a Tory, was filmed by undercover journalists talking of how MPs can get around the hospitality rules by accepting tickets worth just under the £300 limit for declarations. You'd be amazed at the number of times I've been to races and the ticket comes to £295, he said, according to a report published by The Times. So yeah, if you go to 9 different events that all are £290 or whatever, that doesn't get declared. If you go to what...
That is so fucking witless as well. Oh, you'd be amazed how many times my tickets cost £295, lads. That reminds me of a fucking ex-squaddy I worked with once who told every new fucking person at the company that, when you're talking to the customers, you can get away with, instead of saying thank you very much, if you say it quickly, you can say wank me hairy crotch and they don't notice. And it's like, wow. That's the exact same vibe, do you know what I mean? Guy thinks he's fucking stumbled upon the fucking Rosetta Stone or some shit.
Oh,
that is, perfect fucking
it's not wrong.
Holy shit.
It's the same vibe. So there's later on in the article, Rose Whiffen from Transparency International UK said, when parliamentarians are offered gifts and hospitality from private companies, they should ask themselves what the motivation behind this is. Private companies may use sporting and other events as opportunities to ingratiate themselves with parliamentarians and bend parliamentarians' ears. Unfortunately, interactions at social occasions between ministers and outside interests rarely see the light of day, owing to limited rules around lobbying. In order to ensure that lobbying no longer happens behind closed doors, the government must update the rules to address the informal lobbying loophole. Which is what this all comes down to. It's by design. It's like this.
I mean,
but the lobbying bit is just on its own. It doesn't make any sense. You can't stop lobbying without stopping second jobs fully. You've got to put so many restrictions on what MPs can and can't do to make any of this make fucking sense as a system, and they never will because they love money.
Yeah,
the first thing you would need to do is stop them from owning fucking second houses, and they would the system would fucking collapse.
The turkeys are never going to fucking vote for Christmas on this one.
I mean, they're not, and David is correct. So many of the problems in the UK can be traced back to property portfolios being owned by MPs for a start, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. But yeah, this is just to show you, for all that they bang on about, look at all this crime taking place, and then it turns out it's not real. Meanwhile, it's fucking endemic in, the corporate sector, starting with the government in the US, but even over here, our governments, they're just completely and utterly in hock to whoever is prepared to give them, well, let's have a look at the list. Laura Trott, Pensions and Financial Inclusion Minister, got free tickets and hospitality at Glastonbury worth more than £3,000 from Google. And it's come the fuck on. Why would you ever need to accept that? That is a bribe. That is just straight up a bribe. If Google, a company that is as international as Google, turns around and says, hey, we really like you, would you like to go to Glastonbury on our dime? That is a bribe. And whether it is legally qualified as one or not does not matter. Morally and functionally it is.
Imagine being offered that kind of fucking bribe from Google of all fucking companies and not going, more? Could you not do more? They can afford it.
I think part of it, so here's the other thing. This is where I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on a second. So this is not in the article. This is just taking a shot in the dark here, because it very much is in the dark. They hide it. These are the things that they're comfortable declaring. You have to bear that in mind. These are the things that they're comfortable going, oh, it's just hospitality, it's fine. Are you willing to bet that there's not members of our parliament who are getting other things which don't get declared and that are done in other ways? And some of this,
probably they're getting other things, but I would imagine that those other things are all still relatively fucking small fry.
Yeah,
not necessarily.
Google should be. If I had power, Google should be offering me at least millions of pounds.
I mean, this is what they've kind of fucking did with like Tony Blair. Like, remember Tony Blair after he finished office, and Gordon Brown and a whole bunch of others, they get invited on the speaking tours. No one actually cares what these fuckers have to say. They're being paid for services after the fact. That's what the speaking tours are. You know? It's just an excuse. Because it's not one-to-one, it's perfectly fine and legal. Barack Obama got the same thing as well. He cleaned up like nobody's business from all the financial firms. He got invited to give speeches to Wall Street all over the place. And you might say, well, Barack Obama's really good at giving a speech. But I'm like, sure, okay, but is he hundreds of thousands of pounds good enough? Is that something you really need as a business expense? Why would you actually do that? And why would so many groups do it immediately after he finishes office? And the answer is, it is a bribe, but because it is removed by temporal, distance, it doesn't count as one.
Which is why, if you are ever an MP, then you should live with a limited income for the rest of your life.
Yeah,
I would agree. I think MPs should be required to live on like state-derived benefits.
Have you considered that this is just inherent human nature and the way things work, and we can't have a society with a government where they don't a private corporation doesn't close centre parks once every 3 weeks so they can hunt people for sport?
They can just go to centre parks. Like, they don't need to close it.
Well, that's it. That's been news nuggets, which has been quite a bit. So, shall we do the main topic tonight, guys? Shall we talk about the strikes?
I think we should just do Commentariat and clock off.
Yeah, there's something so inherently draining whenever we talk about the inner machinations of the Labour Party.
Yeah.
Well, would you like to hear about actual organised labour instead?
Yeah,
yes.
All right. So we said tonight we were going to cover SAG-AFTRA and the WGA who are on strike, and we will explain who they are in a minute. But we are aware that we get a lot of people tune in whenever we do like big current topics, and they're tuning in for the first time. And since we're going to talk about unions this week, we're going to deliberately start by making this as accessible as possible and explaining our understanding of how unions work up front. So just a note for listeners, if you're familiar with all of this that we're about to lay out, just bear with us. It's for the sake of people who are coming for the first time.
If you're a first-time listener, you know what I mean? We're gonna softball you and not just spend the previous 45 minutes talking about fucking Keir Starmer. And
let's dive right in.
Yeah,
I'm working on the assumption that they'll have skipped over the starting part if they were really interested in SAG-AFTRA.
Well, fucking go back. We didn't do it for sport.
On the other hand, if you did skip over and you jumped here, welcome. Let's talk about it. So, for those in the UK who are sitting here wondering, why are we talking about some American
because it's
media?
Our fucking podcast and we do what we want.
Is the true answer. But the fake answer I'm going to give you is because it does actually matter. So all these American unions are currently on strike in their entertainment sector. Why does it matter to us? And according, just apart from general principles of solidarity, other workers and all of that, we actually
because they might not make any more Marvel movies.
Yeah, well, it might actually affect the creative industries over here in the UK. The Union for Creative Industries, BEC2, has actually said that the US strikes could hit and potentially halt UK production. So it is worth understanding what is going on over there and why does it matter. Before we get to that, let's talk about the basics of unions. So I'm going to ask a question here. How does a capitalist make money?
Through blood.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Okay, we got the Marxist theory answer in. I'm gonna be fair. I'm gonna give you the definition that is commonly used in business school, right? Which is
the big brain answer.
Yeah.
Is there a pop-up book that goes along with this?
Yeah. Other more real schools are available.
No. It's business school, not economics. So the commonly
they call this the
definition...
Frankfurter School.
There was a puppet show after. No, for real though, the definition is that it's sales price minus materials costs minus tools costs minus labour costs equals profit.
Get the fuck
and if you think that sounds...
There's 3 question marks missing in there.
Yeah, well, but it is. I mean, it is straight up is. If you take what you're selling it for, and then you subtract the cost of materials, the cost of labour, and the cost of
business school is not fucking real, man.
And
well, here's the thing. Here's the actual. Here's the actual
for adults.
Here's the actual joke, Alasdair.
Soft play area, you know.
The actual joke, Alasdair, is that is also the Marxist definition of how capitalists make money. Because, believe it or not, most of what Marx taught on fundamentals of like how capital is made and produced is just repeated wholesale in business school.
Yeah, but I feel
direction.
I feel like in business school, that's like the entire first year, whereas in Marxist theory, that's like page 1.
Yeah, well, you're not right. Like the business schools basically.
Theory?
Oh, I don't have 20 hours spare right now, Jamie. So like. The thing about the Marxist theory is like its fundamentals are recognized as correct by business school. They just like, yes, and this is how we exploit labor with it, which kind of gets us into this next section, because if your materials costs are fixed by the commodities market, you can't like get copper for cheaper. It's like priced in. And if your tools costs are fixed by the industry,
spinning in his grave.
Yeah, exactly. And tool costs are fixed by the industry market. Like you can't buy a fucking JCB for cheaper. And if the sales price is being kept down by your competitors, because you can't go lower, they're already undercutting you, etc. The only way to increase profits is to either increase your market share by selling more stuff, or to lower your labor costs. And if you're a huge corporation that's market dominant, you're already selling as much as you can. And as an aside, that's why planned obsolescence is a thing. It's to make sure that you've got return customers when you've already saturated the market.
Yeah.
So what we've basically established here, very simply, is that it's in companies' interests, capitalist interests, to try and cut down on labour costs as much as possible, because that increases your profit. And for many large companies, that's the only way to actually increase their profits reliably.
It's the easiest saving. If you've ever had a retail job, the first thing that they'll do is they'll cut down on the fucking hours as soon as the area manager shows up. That's why.
Yep, absolutely. Which then leads us to a question. What is a union?
Well, Webster's dictionary defines it as...
A union is a bunch of workers coming together and deciding that they will negotiate together against their employer to ensure that they get better terms and conditions, and to make sure that they don't get their pay cut in order to increase the profits.
Are we really explaining unions to the listeners?
Well, I think it's important to understand these fundamentals, because in particular with this strike, there is an important question, which is, how does a union work? Like, how do they actually succeed at what they do, right? Because it's one thing.
I mean, that's one thing, but what is a union is something else entirely. Like, do you want me to get a fucking costume out and do Baby Shark for them as well?
Listen, 3 or 4 episodes ago, I asked what is a Star Wars, so I'll allow
it.
That felt like fucking redundant as well, to be fair.
Well, we're just a redundant podcast, Jamie. Glad you're finally on board.
Yeah, that's like basically fucking fact. So yeah.
Yes. But in all seriousness, like, unions work by essentially recognizing that labor and management, capital, the people who actually own the companies, are in opposition to each other, and that the only thing the workers have is the work they do. That is their leverage. And if they together decide that they are going to, say, down tools and stop working, or limit the amount of work they do, that directly inputs into the profits that are made on the other end by the capitalist, because less work done means less money out on the other end. That is the only chip that unions basically have to play.
To be fair, I think the important thing to highlight here is that obviously, the chances are our listeners fucking very well know all this. And again, we did fucking caveat this at the start of this, but it will get more fucking detailed soon. But this is not a fucking common, thing to think. Normal people, if you will, don't actually immediately realise that their boss is their fucking enemy.
Yeah, they don't. They think HR is their friend.
Yeah.
The
fools.
And there's a lot of people who, whenever there's a big leftist issue comes up, they go, I wonder what's this all about? And when they go looking for more information, it's inaccessible because they don't know these basic things. They don't understand, well, how does a union actually work? Why are they doing this? Can't everyone just get around a table and be friends? You hear this.
That's what the union's trying to do.
It literally is, and we will talk in depth about that in a minute. So, at fundamental, a union is a group of people organised together to try and talk to the boss as one, rather than individual, because if you go to the boss on your own, you're just one person, the company's huge, they're not going to listen to you. But if you and your 50 mates all go together, then they actually have to pay attention. One person gets fired, one person misses a shift, not a big deal. Everyone clocks out for the day, the factory shuts down. That's how a union works. And the objective here, to be crystal clear, is not like they don't just want to do damage. The point is they want to protect terms and conditions, and they want to get paid. And truth be told, they don't want to damage the business either, because if the business gets damaged, they don't get a paycheck. It's just about making sure things are fair.
Almost as if bosses are actually surplus to requirements.
Well, that's advanced theory, David. We're not getting to that.
Yeah, page 2 of Marxist theory and year 2 of business school.
Yeah, absolutely. But there is a question I seriously want to ask.
Here's how to protect your phony baloney job.
Yeah. But there is, on the subject of like unions in general, and understanding that we are potentially getting people who've never really thought about this before, there is an important question to ask, which is, are unions good or bad?
Yes.
Yes is the answer.
They are good unless it's the GMB, in which case bad.
Yeah, right. So here's
Fucking
the other
scabs.
thing. A lot of time when you hear about unions, it comes in the form of corporate media who, for reasons which we are going to demonstrate in this actual episode, they are against unions. They don't want unions to prosper. They don't want people to be members of unions. They don't want to talk about unions.
Don't listen to the fake stream news.
Well,
I mean, it is very enlightening whenever. It is enlightening whenever you have like a fucking dipshit like Richard Madeley talking to Mick Lynch, and it's just like, watching a normal person just beat the shit out of a buffoon.
Yeah. Well, in this very particular thing, we're going to talk about the actual unions which are tied into the news industry. So this is going to be very enlightening. You're going to like the back half of this, I promise. So, like, different unions have different types of relationship with an employer. There's like genuine unions who are there to like advocate for the purposes of their workers. There's also unions that started off doing that and that since have kind of become politicized a bit. And I don't mean politics in the sense of like conservative versus liberal or Tory versus Labour. I just mean in the sense of...
Those are the same thing.
No, I mean in the sense of like generations of people who like, they've handpicked their successors, and there's like, there is a cushy position to be made in being part of a union, so to speak. This is a thing, and we can't deny that this exists across time and space.
A big critique of unions is that whether a union's actual job is to represent its members or to ensure the continued existence of the union.
Yeah, exactly. And like this is a real thing, and we shouldn't shy away from it. You should always recognize that, like with everything in life, there are good ones and there are bad ones. And there are also unions, which, as we said, we alluded to, are not actually what I would call real unions. They look like a union, they talk like a union, but their actual job is
GMB.
Their actual job is to head off any meaningful concessions to workers by sitting there and making everyone think, oh, we're a union, we're fighting for you, pal. But then they go in the office room and they chat to, the people in charge of the companies and like, right, okay, what's the minimum we can give these guys to get them to go away? And they collect their paycheck off the back of that. So as with everything in life, if you want to know if a union is good or bad, don't go and talk to the employer, because they will just tell you horse shit either way. And don't rely on like the corporate media or anything. You actually have to do the research and you have to look at it. And one of the best ways to tell is to look for times when that union has fought for the workers and what they got out of it. Which kind of leads us to the final question. Why do unions go on strike? And we kind of answered it.
Because it's funny to watch your boss shit his pants. That's why.
This is true.
Basically, unions go on strike to get better conditions for their members. That's it. That's straight up it. And they don't just do it out of nowhere. Usually they have to be forced into it. Because remember, when they're on strike, when they're not working, they don't collect a paycheck. So you've got to ask the question, how bad do things have to get before you're prepared to suspend your income in the hope that you can improve things further down the line? Big deal. And so that then leads to, two basic questions, important ones. First is, what is a strike? And the answer is it's just withholding labour, whether that's working to rule, or whether it's actually just like not turning up at all, or more likely standing outside the venue and encouraging others to boycott it and not go in. The withdrawal of labour is a key component.
Sorry, I just remembered that fucking dipshit with the rail strikes. Oh, I crossed the picket line and they didn't even fucking yell at me or call me a scab or anything. It's like, you don't work there, mate.
Yeah, which leads to the question of like, what is a scab and why are they called that? And the answer, like the term scab, it's insulting. It's intended as an insult. But what a scab is it's someone who undermines the negotiating power of unions by turning up to do work when a union is on strike. That's it. If a union calls a strike, they're withdrawing labour. That is their one leverage. If you go, well, fuck you guys, I'm going to work anyway, then you undermine the strike and undermine their power. That's where it comes from. And that's why going into work for an employer while the union that is affiliated to that employer is on strike is a scabby, horrible thing to do, because you're directly damaging the chance of these people who are suspending their incomes to try and get better conditions for everyone of actually succeeding. So,
yeah. But on the other hand, you have to consider that you do get to drive a train.
Once.
Only if you're in the British military, and only once, Jamie. So that's the kind of baseline. That's us kind of laying out our theory and our understanding of how we come to it. So let's actually now get into the particulars here, starting with SAG-AFTRA. So what is a SAG-AFTRA? That's the Screen Actors Guild and the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, right? So they're a union. And how do they actually work? And this is important. So there's a concept in union organising called a closed shop. And
we're not allowed them anymore.
Well, we're not allowed them, but they still exist in some places. So the idea behind a closed shop goes like this. A union comes in and they negotiate for better rates for workers at a particular company or a particular location. Everyone who is a worker there gets the benefit of that negotiation. Like, the unions don't just negotiate for themselves usually. It's been negotiating for everyone on the job. And it kind of has to be, because like if the union members are suddenly getting higher pay, everyone else is going to demand higher pay as well. So it's just all in one. The idea of a closed shop, then, is that if you join a company which is affiliated with a union, and that union is negotiating and getting you terms and conditions, you are required to either A, be a union member, like you have to join the union to get work there, or B, you still have to pay union dues out of your paycheck, even if you're not a union member. And the rationale is because you still get the benefit of the union going and doing all that organising work for you.
I remember when I started working for Alasdair years ago that the store manager telling me with glee that there was an option to join GMB, but you don't have to because it's not a closed shop. It's like, thanks, man. Yeah. Really, really glad to know that GMB is representing this place and that I don't have to join them.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. Why closed shops, why are they necessary? Why are they a good thing, right? And the answer is, well, okay, yes, it depends on the union. If it's GMB, who notoriously suck and aren't a real union as far as I'm concerned, then sometimes not having a closed shop is a good idea. But in general, the reason behind closed shops is to basically ensure that the unions continue to have the resources they need in order to do their work, you know? And it's kind of important because the SAG-AFTRA is a closed shop union. Everywhere they work that's not legislated against it, they run closed shops as much as possible. They don't get to do it everywhere, but they get to do it in California and over in New York, which is important. It's
so like
the states in between.
The two important places they can do it.
Yeah. But, places in between where they sometimes film don't necessarily have that. What a lot of states in the US have been doing is passing what they describe as union prevention laws. They're called right-to-work laws, but in practice they're union prevention laws.
Yeah.
And I'm going to quote you now from Backstage. Backstage is a publication and organising hub that served as the number one resources, absolutely like by every metric, for performers to find work. And basically it's like they've got like 100,000 members, and it's basically the industry talking shop for the creative industry in the States. So here's what they say. States without union prevention laws require workers in a unionised workplace to pay dues to the body as pertinent negotiations benefit all employees. This requirement means that because the union is negotiating for worker benefits, all workers must compensate the union whether they want to or not. Workplaces in these states are known as closed shops, which means that to be hired in a unionised workplace, you must be a union member. For an actor, this means getting a gig on a unionised production can result in automatic union membership. It might also mean that union actors are prioritised in audition processes. States with union prevention laws, however, do not mandate employees to pay a fee to a union. This intentional loophole means that even if a union negotiates for worker benefits, the workers don't need to join the union. Workplaces in these states are known as open shops, which means one doesn't have to be a union member to be hired in a unionised workplace. For an actor, this means that if you're hired at a unionised theatre, you have a choice whether to sign a union contract or not in a right-to-work state.
Yeah.
These policies influence the degree that labour unions can organise and gain momentum in certain states. In states without union prevention laws, some unions have built-in constituencies and revenue streams, like you start a union, immediately there's money there that you can work with. In states with union prevention laws, it's hard for unions to recruit members when workers could benefit from a union's activism without having to contribute to the cause. Without recruitment, the union finds a workplace majority. The union lacks a workplace majority and funding. And as I said before, California, Illinois, and New York all are, they don't have union prevention laws. So, but in practice, they still fight the whole right to work landscape alongside their, people in other states because it affects them all.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing to understand. This SAG-AFTRA, they are a closed shop and they have very particular rules around what you can and cannot do. And it's intentional to make sure that a union maintains its authority, maintains its power and its ability to negotiate and win against a much larger organisation we'll get to in a minute. In contrast, the Writers Guild of America is another union. They aren't a closed shop. Not exactly. They actually have a slightly more complicated rule set. So the way it works is you don't have to join the WGA to work on any particular production. Instead, you become eligible to join and then can take part in certain WGA-only kind of events after you've done enough work in the industry. So it doesn't prevent people getting a start, but what it does mean is that once you're sufficiently experienced, they take you on. And there's actually, typical writers, there's a points-based system for this that's clearly documented, and it's based on the kind of work you're doing. So they have like two classes of membership. They've got full membership, for which you need 24 points or units, and anything less than that is associate membership. And the way it works is associate dues are way less than full membership dues in order to help people who are just starting out.
Yeah.
And so they have like a whole schedule. For example, you gain 2 units or 2 points for each complete week of employment with a guild's jurisdiction on a week-to-week basis. So you just work enough time in any role that is sort of guild affiliated and eventually you're qualified to join. And then it goes all the way up. And like, if you manage to sell a screenplay for a feature-length theatrical motion picture, radio play, or teleplay 90 minutes or longer, you immediately get 24 points and can join right away. And so it's kind of fair system that's there. It's like, if you make it, then congratulations, welcome in. If you're just getting started out, say you're attached to a writer's room or you're doing things like polishing a script or whatever, if you do enough of that work, then you're qualified to get in. And so anyone who tells you that like the WGA is some kind of cartel or anything like that they're excluding people, it's horseshit. They're absolutely not. They've intentionally structured things to prevent this. Now, let's compare and contrast. Why is this difference in place? And the answer is that when it comes to actually filming a production with actors, right? Screen Actors Guild, American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, everyone on set has to turn up and work together, and it's all scheduled and it's all highly, rigorous. You can't really have a drop-in, drop-out, who's a member of a production, who's not. It's too chaotic. Meanwhile, when it comes to writing these scripts and selling them, etc., it's much looser because it's much more commission-based and it's much more someone submits a speculative script and it gets read and maybe decides to pick it up or not. So that's the reason for the difference in these structures. It's all about effective ways of working that enable negotiation to take place in the back end.
Is this why any TV show that was made around the Writers Guild strike usually has a bunch of dog shit episodes in the middle of whatever season was affected because they've pulled a load of randoms who are not yet eligible to be members of the Writers Guild?
Yes and no. So, as it turns out, when the WGA goes on strike,
some TV shows are just like that.
Well, it's more complicated than that. So when the WGA goes on strike, they actually issue a rule which is, if you break our strike, if you come in as someone who's not WGA affiliated and you start selling screenplays, you're free to do that, but you will never be a member of the WGA, ever. And when our strike concludes and when we're back to working, we will remember that you did this to us. So, it's like an
blacklisting. What a shocking and terrible thing to be doing. Like,
I think it's perfectly reasonable.
It's not.
It's
but
communism.
That's exactly the kind of fucking shit that, the big production companies pull all the fucking time when they can get away with it.
Well, they are very precise about this, and as we'll go on and discuss in detail, they're not unreasonable about shit. So yes, there are situations where you can sell productions and stuff whilst the WGA is on strike, and they're very clear about what's kosher and what's not, what they're happy with people doing, and what undermines their bargaining position. And that's what it comes down to. In every case, it's a question of, are you hurting our ability to negotiate to get our members better results? And if you're not, they don't care. They really don't care. And they've even issued clarifications during this strike, because they saw people getting hate on social media for doing things like finishing out productions. And WAGA is like having to come in and go, no, it's cool. These guys, like, they've agreed to our interim agreement, etc. They're fine. Don't go after them. And we'll talk more about their strategy in that later. But now that we've defined like who they are and how they work, we've got to ask the really important question, which is, why are they both striking? Why are SAG-AFTRA and the WGA both striking right now? So let's ask us another question.
It's the rise of the machines.
Well, you've spoiled a bit. We are getting to that. But who are they striking against, first of all? Which is the Alliance of Motion... Go on.
Cunts.
Yes. It's the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, the AMPTP. Their members include the major motion picture studios, Paramount Pictures, Sony Pictures, Universal Pictures, Walt Disney Studios, and Warner Bros. It also includes the principal broadcast television networks. This is important, pay attention, including ABC, CBS, Fox, and NBC. It includes the streaming services.
All of those owned by Disney now?
Don't think all of them are. Also includes streaming services like Netflix, Apple TV Plus, and Amazon, as well as certain cable television networks and other independent film and television production companies.
Just so you know, by the way, the plus in Apple TV Plus is silent.
Oh, okay, sure, whatever, don't care. But yeah,
yeah, we'll just batter Trent Reznor.
Yeah, well, whatever. But just like, bear this in mind, because when we get to demands later, remember the size of these companies, remember how huge they are, and remember the compensation that their executives are getting. So that's who they're up against. Why are they actually striking? Like, what requires them to do this? And to do that, we need to have a very brief word about something called inflation. We're going to keep this real quick. Inflation is the tendency over time for your money to be worth less than it was the year before. Prices go up, you can buy less with the dollars or pounds in your pocket, right? We're not going to get into why, inflation isn't always... Here. Yeah, it isn't always good, it isn't always
Money's
bad.
Money's not real, it's bad, etc., etc.
Yeah, but what's important is that every year there's inflation. Banks try and keep it at around 2% for complicated reasons we won't get into, but it happens every year. Which means that every year, unless you are getting a pay rise of at least 2%, you are getting paid effectively less. You are getting less. You're less able to purchase and sustain yourself than you were the year before. And so in this way, inflation necessitates that unions fight for pay increases. Like, if they do nothing, if they just take the same pay every year, then effectively you're getting a pay cut for your members, and over time this really does compound. If you want to see an example of it in action, look at the fucking NHS in the UK. Yeah. The way they tend to do this, the Writers Guild of America, for example, is instead of doing it every year, they just agree a single bump every 3 years. They renegotiate their contract. So bear that in mind. So they're required to come back to the negotiating table. I want to be clear that just because they end up in a strike over pay because they can't make an agreement, it doesn't necessarily mean all productions are stopped. Like I said before, SAG-AFTRA and the WGA do have an interim agreement available with specific productions, which is namely where a production says, yeah, you know what, we'll meet your demands, your terms, that's fine. Is that okay if we carry on working? Or it's where it's like a very unique circumstance where it would be pointless to shut down the production. Like if someone's doing something that was agreed by charity and it's very unique, then they'll sometimes go, yeah, you get a pass, you can go for it. Again, the goal isn't indiscriminate harm, it's to bolster contract negotiations. And they really do want people to take up the interim agreement. I'm going to read a quote from them. To be crystal clear, once an agreement is in place, we fully encourage all of our SAG-AFTRA members to work under that agreement and to promote work made under that agreement. The more projects that get made with the interim agreement, the weaker the AMPTP becomes. And so here we have a glimpse into their strategy. They want to bolster their competitors to the AMPTP so that essentially they're sitting there not making anything because the unions are on strike, and meanwhile their competitors who are willing to play ball with the union, they get to make their productions, and their productions are actually good.
It's divide and conquer.
It is. It straight up is. So this is why, this is the basics of why they have to go do these negotiations. This is what happens when they go into strike. They don't just down tools and burn everything down. But what do they actually want? And I want to actually read you the actual stated demands of, SAG-AFTRA and the WGA. So we'll start with SAG-AFTRA. Our goal in this negotiation is to ensure our members working in film, television, and streaming/new media can continue to earn a professional living with a contract that honours our contributions. We need a contract that will increase contributions to our benefit plans and protect members from erosion of income due to inflation and reduced residuals. I'll explain what residuals are in a minute. Unregulated use of generative AI and demanding self-taped auditions. So let's go through this a minute. What's a residual? If you take part in a production, right, it's filmed. And then that can be shown forever. It doesn't just disappear. So you get paid a one-off fee, and then you get what's called residuals. And residuals are every time that production gets shown again, whether it's on TV or a DVD is issued or whatever, you get a tiny cut of the value of that thing so that you continue to gain income. Because the companies continue to gain income off of reproducing it, why should you not benefit from that labour?
Because that's communism.
Well, go figure. So residuals are a big issue. It's something that they have to argue about quite frequently. Whenever a new media form comes along, the companies will all try and not pay residuals for it. And one of the big reasons that SAG-AFTRA and the WGA tend to go to strike is over that very issue. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Residuals, they've talked about the inflationary issues. They've talked about self-taped auditions. This is an interesting one. So normally in the acting business, they host auditions, and you've seen those videos of George Lucas and Steven Spielberg holding audition sessions where people show up and they give an audition and it's taped and then they make a decision.
Yeah, Spielberg Lucas decides they're not racist enough.
Yeah, but here's the thing: depending on the audition, you can get paid for that. There is a day rate for that because it's using up your time and effort, right? If you are a serious, committed actor, it's your livelihood, and you get invited to several different auditions, then that's time out of your day.
That's time you could be doing something else, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a SAG-AFTRA negotiated day rate for auditions. It doesn't necessarily apply to everyone. There are circumstances when it's open casting calls which don't quite follow this. But generally, if you've been invited to audition for something, SAG-AFTRA says you should get fucking paid for that. Whether or not they actually take you up, you should at least get a little day rate for taking time out of your schedule to go and do that when you could be pursuing other opportunities. Companies have started demanding self-taped auditions where they're just record something on your webcam or whatever and send it in. You don't get paid for those, and it's bullshit. And this is particularly important for new actors and actresses who are just starting out, who, their time really is valuable. They're taking time away from their shift at Denny's or whatever in order to try and break into the industry properly, and this is the shit they're getting, But they also mentioned unregulated use of generative AI. Hold that thought. Put a pin in that. It's very important. We now turn to the WGA, the Writers Guild of America. So, being writers, they are very clear, and they actually issue something called the Pattern of Demands, which is what their members have voted to say, this is explicitly exactly what we are negotiating for. The Pattern of Demands is a constitutionally required statement of general objectives for the NBA negotiations. On March 7th, 2023, the 2023 Pattern of Demands was approved by WGA members, 98.4% voting yes and 1.6% voting no. So this is, what you're about to hear is not just the bigwigs have decided this. The actual members of the WGA have en masse said, we want this. So let's read through it. Compensation and residuals. Increase minimum compensation significantly to address the devaluation in writing in all areas of television, new media, and features. Standardize compensation and residual terms for features whether released theatrically or on streaming. Address the abuse of mini-rooms. To explain, a mini-room is rather than pulling together a full writer's room and running it for a while, instead you just get people into work just for a few days, guys, it's fine. We'll do a single weekend and we'll hammer the scripts out and it'll all be good, rather than an ongoing writer's room they refer to.
Just a bunch of guys writing in a dark kitchen.
Kinda, yeah. Mini-rooms are a bad way to write, and companies have started trying to do them more and more to get around all the terms and conditions attached to writers' rooms, which exist for a reason. I'll talk about that in a minute. Ensure appropriate television series writing compensation throughout entire process of pre-production, production, and post-production. Again, There's this thing where they've started doing we'll just get you on at the start just for a little bit, and then they fucking fire them and don't give them the actual compensation that they should be deserved, and as a consequence, this affects the writing quality immensely. Expand span protections to cover all television writers. There's currently writers who just aren't covered by this, and they're no, this is bullshit. Everyone should be covered by our negotiations. Get them in. Apply NBA minimums to comedy variety programs made for new media. So, the Tonight Show and all the rest of the ones on major cable, they're covered by this shit. And the new media, including YouTube and various other places, they currently aren't. And they're like, this is bullshit. That's the direction the world is moving in. We need to expand to there as well. Increase residuals for undercompensated reuse markets. That's complicated, but basically there's places where they resell or redistribute the existing footage, and they're not really well. They weren't a big issue back in the day, so they let it slide, but now it's kind of hang on, more and more people are watching stuff here or whatever. We need to actually get our residuals properly compensated. And then restrict uncompensated use of excerpts, which is dead simple. It's if someone takes an excerpt from a film or movie or whatever and just uses it, like a big company does, not just a YouTube review or whatever. Sometimes they just don't pay anyone for using it. They're like, no, you're using that to promote your company or whatever. We should get paid for that. Next demand is under pension plan and health fund, which is basically increased contributions. Thank you very much.
Something like 80%, 85% or something of SAG-AFTRA SAG-AFTRA workers don't meet the minimum threshold for health insurance, which is $27,000 or something like that.
That's true. It's not that different from a WGA, by the way. So yeah, it's it matters, and that's why these negotiations matter on those issues. Returning to the WGA, they had this section which is really interesting, and we're going to be talking about at length, which is professional standards and protection in the employment of writers. For feature contracts in which compensation falls below a specified threshold, require weekly payment of compensation and a minimum of 2 steps. So no, you don't get to abuse the interns, right? Strengthen regulation of options and exclusivity in television writer employment contracts. You don't just get to hold an option on my script I've sent you and keep me in limbo forever. At some point, you have to shit or get off the pot. Regulate use of material produced using artificial intelligence or similar technologies. That sounds familiar. Didn't we just mention that a minute ago? Hold that thought. Enact measures to combat discrimination and harassment and to promote pay equity. It's fairly good. Revise and expand all arbitrator lists. I'm going to be honest, I couldn't find what that actually means, but I'm going to presume it's fairly reasonable given that everything else on this list is as well.
Yeah.
I think, but I don't know, I think it relates to who actually is allowed to come in and arbitrate when there's been a contract violation. And they basically want to make that more readily available, but don't quote me on that. Again, this is real inside industry stuff, and I couldn't find anything good on it.
Yeah.
So that's their actual terms, and as I'll talk about later, you won't hear that anywhere because media just doesn't report it because it's all very reasonable, and anyone who listens to it would go, yeah, that seems fair enough. Let's get into specifics.
Sorry, just quickly on the fact that this is reasonable. It's weird how straightforward and reasonable that is, because anytime you think of a union asking for shit in the UK, they've either asked for far too fucking much, or they've asked for nowhere near enough. And when I say far too fucking much, I mean they've asked for we've had fucking, I think the doctors' unions were asking for 20% or some shit. But the reason they were asking for 20% is because for fucking years they just ate shit and just took 1 or 2%, and now they're having to ask for 20. So now they seem unreasonable because they spent years asking for fuck all, just accepting what they were fucking given and not actually taking action.
Again, the quality of the union really matters. A good union doesn't have to ask for that much year to year. A bad union that lets things drag will eventually have to play catch up and look like an asshole. Yep. It's kind of ridiculous. Let's talk about this strike though, because there was something mentioned on both of those lists, and it actually really matters. Jamie called it. It's the rise of the machines. Both of those explicitly mention artificial intelligence. So let's cast our mind back. In 2007, the Writers Guild of America went on strike. And everyone remembers this because television was dog shit for quite some time as a consequence.
R.I.P. Battlestar Galactica Season 3. We hardly knew you.
And this actually is getting flagged up now. People are saying, you don't want another strike because it'll all be terrible like it was back then. But let's compare and contrast. What were they after last time when they went on strike? And that they eventually got as well, by the way.
Was it more reality shows because we got that?
No. The key issues of contention included DVD residuals, which were replacing rerun syndication as a primary profit generator. So again, I said residuals, you get paid. Back in the day, DVDs were just taken off, right? And up until that point, residuals had come from network syndication, so your film gets shown on different networks around the US. in 2007, they were like, shit, they're raking in money from DVDs and we're not getting any residuals from DVDs. And meanwhile, they're ending syndication. No, fuck that. We need residuals from DVDs. They also went to strike over, and this is hilarious, union jurisdiction over animation and reality program writers. Remember how all the reality TV exploded back in 2007? Mm-hmm. It's because reality TV producers weren't unionized, and that was one of the things they went to strike over. And then finally, compensation for new media, which is content written for or distributed through emerging digital technologies such as the internet, aka Netflix. Like, that's what they went on strike over back then. Again, all pretty reasonable. This time, you've heard the list. It's a little bit different, and it both mentioned AI. So here's where I need to explain the AI bit. I'll try and keep this brief and avoid any of the Bitcoin wankery you hear on, Twitter. So what actually is
challenge level impossible?
So let's ask a question. What actually is AI? Just to cut through the
bullshit.
Yeah, cut through the bullshit. What they're calling AI is not AI. It's not artificial intelligence. It's not like some thinking machine. It's not that at all.
Spicy autocomplete.
It is spicy autocomplete. What it is a sophisticated text prediction or image prediction, just data prediction tool. And what it depends on is the data sets that it is trained on. All it's doing is working out what should the next pixels configuration be, or what should the next word be statistically based on this very large data set that I have sitting in front of me. And that's how it works.
And shit people have made.
Well, yes, but it ultimately depends on the data set. And a data set is literally just like hundreds of thousands, millions of books, for example, for a text-based one, or hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of images for an image-based one. And then there's like training steps where the person, trains it on the data. And it's like, the statistical output goes, based on statistics, I think this should be the next output for the input you've given me. And the trainer has to sit down and go, yes, that's good, more like that. Or goes, no, that's bad, less like that. And that creates what's called statistical weightings. It is, at the end of the day, spicy autocomplete. That's what the AI actually is. Now, as I've kind of implied, this limits what it can actually produce artistically. And this is very important. It depends on the training data. When you look at like DALL-E or any of these other ones producing like images, what they're actually doing is they are taking a data set of hundreds of thousands or maybe even 1 million images, and it is mixing and matching different parts of it, depending on its weightings, to come up with something that looks new, but is actually based on the data in the data set. It
also,
can't
it's
produce
dog nightmares.
Yes. This is important. These AIs cannot produce something that is not conceptually in their data set, right? If you were to go to them and say, draw me a Vulcan from Star Trek, it could only do that if someone had inputted images of Vulcans from Star Trek into it, and it had been trained and weighted to understand what that meant.
Otherwise, you're probably going to get like a fucking Falcon or something.
Yeah, exactly, right? And people, post funny images all the time. They're like, haha, I asked the dataset to give me this, and it didn't know what I meant and gave me this instead. That's because it depends on what's in the dataset, right? So these datasets are crucially important. Here's the problem. For the statistical tool to work, it needs very, very large datasets. If it's got smaller datasets, you start to notice something, which is that it's just spitting out portions of that dataset, sometimes wholesale. So in order to be able to do something that looks fairly convincingly as novel, these datasets need to be very, very large. And I'm talking like millions of images and like hundreds of thousands of books and all the rest of it. Here's a problem. That data, by nature, to build something that size, you have to acquire it illegally. You have to acquire it without consent. Because getting, like, if you walk up to an author and go, hey, Stephen King, can I include your complete works in my dataset? Stephen King is quite rightly going to go, what's that data set going to be used for? Oh, I'm training an AI to produce new writing that I can then sell. No, I'd like to be compensated for that, please, if I'm going to let you do it at all. Oh, well, okay, I'll try another writer. It just doesn't work. So what they actually do to build these data sets is just steal shit by scraping it from the internet. Wholesale. Including, like, fan fiction forums, etc., like Archive of Our Own, etc. They've all been scraped in order to produce the data sets that do this stuff.
Show me the Wikipedia AI.
David, there is...
I know, we talked about this already, I know.
Yeah, right, like Disney have done that. So there's an equity problem here, which is that if you are a creative and you're producing material, If this then gets scraped for a data set, and that data set is then used to produce imagery or to produce a script that is then doing you out of a job, then they are literally using your work to fire you. They are stealing from you and using it to make you redundant. And the art that's produced will end up being shitty because it can't come up with anything new. It physically can't. It might come up with a simulation of something that looks like new, but if you're familiar with the underlying data, if you're well briefed in it, then you'll recognize, oh, that looks like such and such as art. That looks very much like it's lifted.
They used the fucking fake AI bullshit for the opening titles of that Secret Invasion show, and it all looked absolutely dog shit.
Absolutely. By the way, in case you're thinking, well, I mean, isn't that just how a person learns? To put it in perspective, if you learn to write, you do not have stored within your memory every single book that you've ever read perfectly. The datasets do, and it is in fact possible with the right engineered prompts.
Once again, referring to the Wikipedia AI, where I assure you, those people do have every book memorized.
Very funny. But in all seriousness, like, you can actually engineer prompts to extract data from a data set. Some artists who are part of a suit that's going forward have done this and shown that by introducing the right terms, you can extract just straight up their art from it. Not even like something that looks like their art, but like their art that was digitized and stored in the data set is in there. You just need the right section of magic words to reproduce it. That's theft. It's just straight up is. So what does this actually mean for the writers?
I do like how like AI is essentially a kind of sphinx that you can only receive the true knowledge of the universe, which is the original stolen art, or just completely abstruse, unintelligible dog shit, which makes no sense to anyone and has no heart or soul in it.
Well, the key thing about this to understand from a labour perspective is that essentially it's a tool for obfuscating theft.
Where did Paul Mason get here?
I mean, that's what it is. So, what does it mean for the writers, though, in particular? So, would it horrify you to know that WJ writers have been asked to do polishes on scripts that have been made using AIs trained on data sets with their own previous work, along with their predecessors' work?
No,
that wouldn't horrify you. It would horrify me.
It wouldn't surprise me.
I'm very surprising, no. Horrifying, yes. So
a man got released from 4 and got brought back in on 5 the next day.
Yeah, this is the thing, though. You've got writers that basically they've written scripts for decades. Their predecessors have written scripts. They've all been gathered together by the studios, and studios have trained in AI and got the AI to produce a script. They've looked at it and went, oh, this is kind of dog shit. Let's hire a writer to just give it a polish. Not write as a script. We've got a script. We just want a writer to do a polish, for which we just pay them a one-off fee, and then we move on.
Yeah, and that'll be the same amount of work. Given the shit you're going to get out of an AI, that'll be the same amount of work as writing the fucking script originally, I bet. But it's classified differently, and they can pay less for it.
It absolutely is. It's even classified differently by the union. Doing a polish on a script gets you, I think, like 1/4 the points that writing the script would, if I recall correctly. Because they recognise like polishing.
Yeah, because like a polish is normally Joss Whedon just going through and just inserting like fucking shit dialogue in an already finished like film about a bus or something. But
they fly now.
Yeah.
But like fucking.
A polish of AI would be...
Polishing an AI one is essentially just writing a new script, I bet.
Yeah, pretty much. But it's even more insulting when it's a script that's been made using you and your peers' work without any compensation. And this is key, you don't qualify for residuals on a polish. And you don't qualify for writing credits either. Instead, it's just produced by the AI, so they don't have to pay residuals to anyone. That's why they're using it. And again, it only works because they've got the scripts that previously have been made, and which weren't necessarily approved for this use. So that's the problem from a writer's perspective. For actors, it's even worse. For actors, this is actually real kind of horror show stuff. AI voice generation and facial mapping is a threat when you combine it with VFX work. Specifically, younger actors are being pressured into giving up rights to their likeness and voice, submitting to being digitally scanned for a one-off paycheck. We've got actors who are saying, oh yeah, I applied to be an extra on X, I showed up, and on the day they're like, okay, so your paycheck is in 2 halves. Half of your paycheck is for going out and like doing the performance, the other half is to go into that trailer and get scanned, and you can't do one unless you agree to do the other. essentially. And when you get scanned, you're signing over your rights for your digital likeness and voice. And they're intentionally targeting new actors in the hopes that when, like, the future Scarlett Johansson takes off, they've already got them scanned, etc. So they've got the rights to use their likeness and fuck them, essentially. And this, by the way, has a lot to do with why Disney wants to do digital reproductions of old Star Wars characters rather than using new actors. It's all about residuals. And if this sounds like sci-fi, it's been in the pipeline for a while.
And also, not just that, but the fact that fucking Han Solo is a good jillion fucking years old now, and like...
Well, yeah, but they could... Like, there's nothing stopping them from hiring a younger actor to play Han Solo. Okay, it didn't work out that well in practice, but, like, you know, the reason they prefer to do the digital versions of it, including, like, you know, Luke, etc., is just because they get to avoid residuals. Yeah. It really is as simple as that.
And they haven't done that with Han Solo, specifically because they know if they do, Harrison Ford will crash a plane into Disney HQ.
You're not wrong. But here's the thing, this has been brewing for a while. Would it surprise you to know that Jet Li opted out of appearing in the Matrix sequels because they wanted to scan all of his martial arts and own the rights to reproduce it along with his moves? This is real. They wanted Jet Li to play Oracle, and he's like, oh yeah, I'd be well up for that. And they're like, okay, so we just want you to get into this trailer and do all of your martial arts moves for like 2 weeks so we can then reproduce them on the computer and sign... Yeah, this is true. There's an article in IndieWire, which I'm not going to read because, you know, you've got the point. But yeah, it's really quite terrible. He did not want to lose ownership of his martial arts moves, and so he turned them down. And that's why we got that other guy I can't remember playing Oracle in the Matrix sequels. So this is a big thing. It's just that back then they tried it on big names. Not
to out myself as the Matrix nerd here, like, but Oracle is the old lady.
No, Seraph, excuse me, I apologize. But yeah, so like they tried it originally, they tried it on like the big names, so big names could fight back. So now they're just systematically doing it to the small names in the hopes that when they're one day big names, they'll already have them. This is a problem. This is a big deal. And so AI is problematic from a labour perspective, but to really drive home how bad it is for everything, I'm going to read you a very short article. I know we're going long tonight, but David said we've got permissions on the topic. So I'd like to read you an article from The New Scientist. It's not long. It's called Union Strike to Save the World from Bad TV and Movies. The threat of AI content hangs over many creative industries. Journalists, actors, and screenwriters need to push back against automation. And it's by someone called Annalee Newitz. So, once upon a time, way back in the innocent year of 2008, I founded a blog about science and science fiction called IO9. It was a fun job where I worked with 8 or so full-time writers who were, as far as I know, completely human. After I moved on, IO9 continued to thrive under the stewardship of some fine biological entities, until last month. That's when I opened the site to discover one of the most terrible posts ever written, entitled simply, A Chronological List of Star Wars Movies and TV Shows. Reader,
looked after 5,000 pages of furious debate.
Reader, it was neither chronological nor was it a complete list. It was, of course, written by artificial intelligence.
The thing is, though, if you asked, like, fucking, do you know what I mean? If you asked, like, 10 Star Wars nerds to give you that list, you'd get 10 different answers, so might as well.
It's only because of the great schism over the holiday special, though.
Yeah, exactly, right. So, like, that has a point, as weird as it is. She goes on to say, I wasn't the only person pissed off by this development.
Did it include Caravan of Courage?
Man, I went and looked it up. They withdrew the article, but I did go and track it down, and it just had made up shit in it. Like Star Wars stuff that just never existed.
All of Star Wars is made up.
Very good, right? Yes, you're incredibly funny. That's an amazing bit. You're a comedy genius, Jamie, and we're lucky to have you. Moving on.
And they were right to say it.
I wasn't the only person pissed off by this development. IO9 Deputy Editor James Whitbrook, who wasn't consulted before the article was posted, wrote an outrage letter to IO9 parent company Geo Media, detailing every mistake in the poorly written blob of text. The AI inclusion blew up into big news, covered everywhere from the Washington Post to Hollywood trade publication Variety.
Yeah, AI was doing great until it took aim at one maligned subsection of society, the Star Wars nerds.
Don't fuck with the Star Wars nerds. For its part, Geo Media claimed this was just a start, then noted ominously that next time the AI would write a better article. The story was such big news because the threat of AI-authored content hangs over many creative industries right now. The Writers Guild of America is currently on strike, in part because the labor union wants a contract that guarantees AI won't be given writing credits for screenplays. The Screen Actors Guild and the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists joined the strike because some movie studios have started replacing actors with digital replicas. In one widely reported case, a studio asked actors for digital scans of their bodies and voices to be used in perpetuity. An actor who took up that offer would be paid for 1 day of work, while the studio would make a profit off of it until the end of time.
What I love about this fucking like thing, because it's not the only place that's had like an article written by AI like shout out, but what I love about it is like there's all this, you know, everyone's hyping about AI constantly, like all year, and people are going, yeah, but can't you see that, like, you know, once it's good enough, it'll just replace real writers, and like fucking, it's like there's no consideration to once it's good enough. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, everyone in a position to fucking pull the trigger on this shit is absolutely believing the hype from, like, all of Elon Musk's fanboys on Twitter.
They're using it right. So like, okay, thesis time.
Thesis, please.
Yes, they're using it to break the negotiating power of artists so they can give them worse contracts because of the threat of AI. That's what it's actually for. They know it's shit. They don't care. As long as it is just plausible enough that it could replace them, then it's to make them desperate to take a lower grade contract because, well, we would pay you more, but we could just get an AI to do it.
And that's what it's really about. That's why the Star Wars article list got published on IO9, do you?
Well, kind of a little bit, yeah. It's so that they can like cut back and pay their writers for IO9 even less. Yes. Like, that's what it's there for. It's there to make a threat. And that's why their response was to say, "Oh, we'll do better next time."
I mean, like on the topic of like AI articles, there were a bunch of WoW people on Reddit who suspected that articles are being scraped from.
This is great, yeah.
From the like the WoW subreddit, and so one of them decided to test that theory by posting on there something to the effect of that they were glad that Grombo or something like that was being added to the game, and that they've been anticipating the addition of Grombo to World of Warcraft for years.
And the community played along, and it became a highly rated thread, and then.
Yeah, and then an AI fucking chatbot, because basically what they are, scraped it and posted it as an article. I don't remember exactly where it was, but it was just like, World of Warcraft players are very excited for the addition of Grumbo.
It's brilliant, but you know, this is the role it kind of plays. You know, it's shit, and they know necessarily that it's not going to get too many clicks, but what matters is their ability to drive down labor prices. So.
I disagree. I think with like fucking websites and news it's all just it's about fucking cramming as many like articles as you can onto the front page of Google. They don't give a shit about paying.
Yeah.
Like, obviously it's a benefit that they don't have to pay writers to churn this fucking piss out anymore. But like the important thing is that if someone is stuck in a video game or whatever and they go on Google and search like how do horses work in V-Rising, what they get back is like 20 fucking like AI generated pages that explain what a horse is first.
Oh yeah,
they can have adverts all over them.
That reminds me, Jamie, I need to give you the good Baldur's Gate 3 wiki rather than the shit one.
So, returning to the article, I talked to Eric Hessier, a member of the WGA contract negotiation team, about why AI has become such a big threat now. As the screenwriter of Alien Contact movie Arrival and showrunner on Netflix fantasy series Shadow and Bone, Hessera I'm butchering his name, I know, is no stranger to speculative scenarios. But AI is no longer the stuff of science fiction. He said that when contract negotiations started earlier this year, AI was barely on anyone's mind at the WGA, but by April, most members had heard enough about AI apps like ChatGPT and Midjourney that they had started to worry. Then stories started pouring in from people in the industry. One came from an actor who shared audition scenes used to audition actors for projects where the script is under wraps. Typically, a writer would be paid to make audition sides as part of their job as a screenwriter, but these were entirely written by ChatGPT and the dialogue was hard to read. It was like the uncanny valley version of writing. Another member of the union came forward to say she had been approached by a producer who wanted to hire her for 48 hours to do what they called a voice pass on an AI-generated feature screenplay. They wanted to make it sound human or fix whatever fell off in the dialogue. Not only was it depressing to contemplate a gig making an AI script sound human, but the pay was unacceptable. A job that would normally take 2 months, writing a screenplay, was compressed into 2 days. Plus, who would get the writing credit? Writers in the union get paid based on screenwriting credits, and if an AI takes top billing, the writer loses. Another issue that Hestia thinks studios should be worried about is copyright. Generative AI models like ChatGPT learn to write by consuming and regurgitating text written by human beings. It could end in a feeding frenzy where work the studio owns is now being legally devoured by a rival studio. It's going to make a spaghetti bowl for lawyers to figure out the ownership of material. And, you get the idea, essentially.
Spaghetti bowl? It's an interesting turn of phrase.
Hard to unpick. That's an Americanism.
A delicious spaghetti for the American media enterprises.
Yeah, I'd love to sit down to a big plate of meat and spaghetti balls.
So this is the kind of issue. Like, it's about not so much like the march of technology. It's about technology being used as a preface to worsen the compensation of workers, essentially. And, you might be sitting at home going, well, isn't AI the future? And aren't you just Luddites if you kind of reject it? Not really, especially because...
also, the Luddites were fucking right.
Yes, this is what we're getting to. So the original Luddites, they weren't against technology. What they were against was the use of that technology to basically destroy them and their way of life and give them no compensation whatsoever for their previous role in the economy. It wasn't about the tech itself, it was about the fact it was being used to essentially, sound familiar, depress wages, worsen conditions, and outright neglect and just get rid of people and give no shits about them. This was not right as far as they were concerned, and their campaign was very much in response to the use of it and what was being done to them, using that as a pretext. It's just progress, except progress which leaves behind actual wake of destruction is not progress that's worth having. Especially because, here's the thing, an ethically assembled AI, assuming you could do that, which for reasons we've discussed you probably can't because of the data sets, but let's say you could get legally acquired, everyone's consenting, data sets to train an AI on, that could be an interesting little tool for someone to use as part of their job. But that's not what's being proposed here. It's not ethically
useful, though?
Well, there's an interesting question there.
If you want an AI to write Hollywood scripts, but for copyright reasons you can't train it on any Hollywood scripts, is anything it shits out going to be useful to Hollywood?
Well, that's the question.
Maybe the entire field of AI is just fucking pointless, and everyone who thinks it's good and posts on fucking Twitter about how it and crypto are the future should be herded into a fucking boat and sunk.
So I'm going to, little aside, a while back, I don't do this anymore because I learned more about the ethics of how it was assembled, but I used to use AI writing tools. We did AI Starmer for a bit. I actually kind of regret doing AI Starmer because of the ethical implications of how the data set was made for that. But I used to play around with AI, and it's fun. As a toy, it's not necessarily a terrible idea, but as a toy, that's all it can be, really. It can't produce anything of serious artistic merit for the reasons we kind of outlined. And so, to bring it back, the Luddites were kind of right, and they got absolutely fucking steamrolled because state violence was brought in to stop them, because they had a point. If they didn't have a point, people wouldn't have gotten on board with it. But they did, and that was a response. One hopes that they're not going to steamroll the unions this time over it. So, that's kind of the run-up, why they're having a strike and everything. Let's ask a question now. How's the strike going? How's the negotiations actually going? Would you like to hear how they started off? Because you might expect the AMPTP would have sat down and negotiated in good faith, but
no, I wouldn't expect that.
Nope, they didn't. They started off by refusing to negotiate, and then finally they invited everyone around the table, and at that meeting,
gave them a bollocking.
Yeah, they just browbeat them about what was already on offer was the best deal, etc. And as they were leaving, they released publicly a comprehensive proposal, banking on the implication that it would look like they'd spent the whole day talking about that proposal. They hadn't. They didn't even discuss the proposal with them. They just said, you should take what's on the table.
I would suggest that the union's counteroffer is...
Well, Ron Perlman's already suggested houses, so...
Yeah, so this is actually, we can report on this. Ron Perlman, famous actor from the Hellboy movies, among other things, he he actually straight up said that there's, the studios were saying, oh, you can only strike for so long. Eventually, you're not going to be able to afford your mortgages, and people are going to lose houses. Ron Perlman went on video on the internet and shot back saying, there's more than one way to lose a house. The people in charge of these companies have names and addresses. There's ways that houses burn down that aren't just natural. And he's just straight up calling for arson against them if they're going to talk this shit. That got taken down. I imagine that Ron Perlman's lawyer got on the phone to him right sharp and said, Ron, you need to take that down. But based. And that kind of gives you an idea of the tension that's here, because he's a big name, and he's that furious about it. So anyway, so they released this proposal, and the unions were like, no, we didn't talk about that, and no, we're not accepting it. Since then, what they've done is the Motion Picture Association have basically, they have updated the offer a few times. It's been pretty mealy-mouthed stuff. They are actually ignoring SAG-AFTRA and refusing to talk to them, and instead focusing on the WGA, right? And if you think about this logically, it's divide and conquer, but it's also because it's, AI is much harder to, make work to replace scripts than it is to serve as helping with replacing people, because the people replacing is still happening fundamentally because of humans and VFX. So they're focusing on the WGA first because they see them as more essential.
And that's the VFX mob that are barely fucking unionised and also not on strike, where they are.
Didn't it just unionise though?
Yeah, hold that thought. We're getting to it. So how's that going? How's their efforts with talking to the WGA going? Deadline, the publication, has the headline: WGA says AMPTP's latest contract tithe is neither nothing nor nearly enough. Typical writers. And overall, as I said, they're refusing to negotiate in earnest and trying to wait out the strikes, while also trying to foster discontent among the strikers. So here's an update from Deadline again. SAG-AFTRA's negotiating committee said Sunday it remains ready at a moment's notice to go back to the bargaining table to secure a righteous deal to end the actors' strike, which is now in its 46th day. Unfortunately, as we've seen from the recent news out of the WGA negotiations, it appears the AMPTP is still unwilling to make the concessions necessary to make a fair deal that would bring the strikes to a close. SAG-AFTRA leaders have said that they've been ready to resume negotiations since the strike began and are only waiting for Carol Lombardi, president of the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, to call them back to the bargaining table. On August 15th, Duncan Crabtree Ireland, that's a real name, I can't believe it is, but Crabtree Ireland is a real name, who is SAG-AFTRA's National Executive Director and Chief Negotiator, told reporters that we remain very eager to get back to the table, as we've had every day since the actors' strike began on July 14th. We have been ready, willing and able to continue bargaining with them, and we very much want the AMPTP to come back to the table. He noted at the time, however, that there's been no contact by the AMPTP to SAG-AFTRA. They just stonewalled them.
I feel like Crabtree Island is probably in the South Pacific somewhere.
Maybe, who knows? So the WGA has said they've been making small progress, but it's nowhere near enough to end the strike.
Didn't one of the studios have all the fucking trees cut down outside its entrance so that the fucking the picket line would get cooked?
Yeah, we are going along tonight, but this is a cool little story. So in Hollywood, one of the studios, I think it was Universal, cut down some trees that the all the strikers were campaigning under and walking back and forth just to deny them shade. Turns out this was in violation of local ordinance, and we shouldn't have done that, and they're going to be fined. Yeah, tree law. Unfortunately, they're being fined something like $200. Is bullshit.
Tree law.
Tree vigilante justice.
Yeah, well, but that's the level of petty it's at. They're just doing everything they can to undermine it. And speaking of undermining it, I quoted from Deadline a couple of times there. How's the press covering all of this? Because this matters. So, generally, the press has been covering it pretty poorly. I haven't found a single major news outlet that's clearly laid out the demands of either SAG-AFTRA or the WGA. I've not been able to find one. They just haven't really... They've conspicuously neglected to mention their actual demands.
Well, because they don't want to give the fucking newsroom ideas, I imagine.
Yeah, exactly. I put it to you that this is intentional. Corporate media is generally anti-union. Also remember...
Going to replace Hugh Edwards with some kind of digital homunculus.
Well, here's the thing. You got to remember, the major news broadcasters like NBC are members of the AMPTP, right? In fact, Deadline, who have been quoted from... You'll be surprised to find out that one of their holding companies is, part of the AMPTP. So even as they're reporting on it,
is this where they get the crisis actors from?
Well, who can say? But what was interesting is that I decided to do a read into, like, so how is this being portrayed then? Okay, they're not covering the actual demands, so how are they doing it? I came across about 50 different articles that played up how television was shit during the 2007 WGA strike and how it's going to repeat. Like, I found that all over the place. I also found, a lot of articles talking about, how things are so good in Hollywood these days, et cetera, et cetera. It's all very shit like that. But it's interesting that they still have to use kind of kid gloves on SAG-AFTRA because, it's fronted by people like Bryan Cranston and Aubrey Plaza and people who, like, your average person kind of likes and respects and has got time for, So we can't immediately demonize them. But how they are covering it all is interesting. Here's the second and final article I'm going to read you on this topic. This is from Counterpunch, who do some really good reporting. And it's about how entertainment trade magazines spin the WGA SAG-AFTRA strikes. So, just 2 days after Hollywood writers' strike began on May 2nd, 2023, Deadline Hollywood tweeted, "Saturday Night Live fans want to know what you are missing? Kieran Culkin and Jennifer Coolidge were set to host the final 2 episodes of a season before the writers' strike forced an end to season 48 of a venerable NBC show."
And people say strikes are bad.
Exactly. How can you possibly assume a strike is bad if it's fucking stopped SNL from airing?
But here's the thing. In other words, how is the strike affecting consumers? Why are the underpaid, exploited writers deliberately standing in the way of your favourite shows?
Who gives a fuck? It's like that. It's like the thing you mentioned there, though, about there's all these articles about how bad television was during the last writer's strike, and I want to point out again that a lot of television was just like that.
Yeah. So the article continues, the Writers Guild of America and the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, which represents major Hollywood studios such as Netflix, Amazon, Disney, had reached an impasse after 6 weeks of negotiations, resulting in the WGA voting unanimously to authorize a strike. Streaming services have changed how writers are paid, including paltry residuals and weekly wages, and have created a gig economy wherein writers have no choice but to jump from job to stay afloat. Network TV, where seasons run for at least 20 episodes, allow steady full-time work for months. Streaming shows typically mean less work, less pay, and shrinking writers' rooms. In July, the American Actors Union SAG-AFTRA joined the writers on the picket lines after failed negotiations with the AMPTP, which similarly included disputes over pay, regulation of AI, and better healthcare. Trade publications zeroed in on workers immediately, minimising their demands and rarely focusing on the major studios in action. After Snoop Dogg cancelled 2 Hollywood Bowl shows in solidarity with WGA and SAG-AFTRA, Rolling Stone tweeted that the strikes were completely unrelated to what he does as a musician. Rolling Stone later deleted the post. A May Variety headline villainised a writer for a tongue-in-cheek picket sign referencing Jenna Ortega's comments about having changed lines on her show Wednesday. Deadline published an article in July quoting an executive who said, "The end game is to allow things to drag on until union members start losing their apartments and losing their houses." See our previous comment about Ron Perlman. Mm-hmm. A pattern in trade publications' coverage of the strike soon emerged. Writers against viewers, writers against actors, and finally, writers against each other, where forging ahead might mean losing everything. The Writers Guild of America immediately called out the union-busting Deadline article as studio propaganda. Comedian, actor and writer Jenny Yang told Yahoo News, "As a former labour organiser, this article reeks of a desperate attempt by these corporate insiders to break our morale and scare us." Entertainment magazines, such as Deadline Hollywood, Hollywood Reporter, Variety and Rolling Stone, have a clear stake in the strike. All are owned by Penske Media, which rakes in millions yearly in award show advertising. Although initially slated for September 2023, the Primetime Emmy Awards have already been postponed until January 2024. And Emmy consultants believe campaign advertising might only add fuel to the fire. "I think a noisy campaign could do more harm than good," one consultant told the Los Angeles Times back in May. "I don't think it's a good look to be seen spending millions of dollars on an Emmy campaign right now." Studios failing to meet the union's demands results in far less content for publications like Deadline and Variety. Writers and actors are prohibited from engaging in any publicity services, including providing personal interviews and attending for your consideration events, panels, or premieres.
I love all the fucking scab YouTubers they've been getting in to fill all the gaps in the schedules that they've got for everything now, like fucking the Mr. Beast and that TikTok woman.
So I don't know about TikTok women, but actually Mr. Beast was working under he was working under contract that was approved. He wasn't scabbing, as it turns out.
I fucking hate that prick.
I know, right?
Same.
I hate him.
But like
they actually made a post about this, explaining that no, Mr. Beast was fulfilling the terms of a contract that was previously negotiated and that the union signed off on. He's absolutely fine, leave him alone, basically, which sucks.
I vehemently disagree.
Yeah, I will not, actually.
Like, I think the key point is he's a cunt for many reasons, but he's not a scab, so fair. Yeah, I mean, we'll see.
Huge fucking scab energy.
He does, doesn't he? So, for entertainment media, a resolution is crucial, but not for the same reason as it is for the unions. So to conclude, it says, writers and actors expect to earn a living wage, especially for projects that make a killing for multi-billion-dollar studios. Disney CEO Bob Iger recently told CNBC that the writers and actors' expectations are just not realistic and that he finds the strikes disturbing. But that's coming from someone who makes 535 times a Disney employee's median pay. It doesn't get more disturbing than that. So that's like how the media is essentially kind of covering it. The industry is like doing all they can to mitigate it. The mainstream media is reporting on it just by saying, oh, it's just like 2007, and otherwise just not mentioning it. And would it surprise you to know that AMPTP has hired the Levinson Group, a strategic communications and issues management firm with a global reach, is their strapline, to help them manage their public image during this.
Issues management firm.
Yes, issues management firm. Their media consultants and strikebreakers is my read on it.
Just call yourself a fixer.
Yeah. I mean, knock off Pinkertons is my kind of read, but hey, who knows? So that's where things are at. There has been fallout from the strikes, though, and there's been quite a lot. So there's a couple aspects we haven't covered. One is that studios feel comfortable doing all this because we're able to get content from abroad for dirt cheap. Unfortunately, labour efforts in America have inspired unions around the world to stand up, especially, as it turns out, in South Korea. Netflix, in particular, is fucking terrified because they've been getting content from Korea for dirt cheap because the unions there have been walked over for a while. Think Squid Game and things like that. South Korean actors and Netflix originals want better pay. Their company refuses to meet with their union. Their union is now getting militant. The South Korean Actors Union is now standing up because they're looking at SAG-AFTRA and going, well, if they can do it.
This is largely down to Squid Game, isn't it? Because they really fucking noticed when that one got so big and they got paid almost fuck all off the back of it.
Yes, it is. But what's really very explicitly citing the work of SAG-AFTRA is inspiring them. As news of SAG-AFTRA strike broke in mid-July, Song Chang-gon, a 51-year-old actor and current president of Korean Broadcasting Actors Union, was still waiting to hear back from Netflix, a company that is proving to be difficult to get hold of. Literally, they keep trying to find the fuckers and they are dodging them because they don't want to get into the same sort of dispute. Yeah. But they've been inspired by SAG-AFTRA and by seeing how little they're getting for the likes of Squid Game, etc. So that's good. That's some improvement. Another bit, which has been excellent, the studios, one of the reasons they feel so comfortable with all of this is because they can use VFX work a lot of the time to fill roles that previously they'd have to pay a lot of money for. Would it surprise you to know that all the old physical prop production teams were all unionized, whereas the CGI teams weren't? And similarly, they don't need to pay residuals to animators, and they can treat their animators like dirt. Good news then that earlier in this month, Marvel VFX artists took the first step towards unionization and applied to the National Labour Relations Board for union recognition with the backing of the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees. Marvel VFX artists saying, we want a union. And just recently, a couple of days ago, visual effects crews at Walt Disney Pictures followed them and also fired with the National Labour Relations Board to unionize with the backing of the VFX union. So, this is what's especially good about this is, I hate to give him credit, President Biden's actually been pretty good on unionization issues.
We don't need to do that. We can skip this bit.
Well, no, there's a little bit that's worth mentioning. So he beefed up the National Labour Relations Board, and it's actually instituted new rules that say if a company in any way fucks with a unionization effort, that union is automatically recognised. Previously, they got to try whatever shit they wanted, and if it didn't work, but they got no repercussion. Now, if they're found to unduly try and influence any union recognition process, that union is automatically considered recognised. So that's pretty good, and it makes it much more likely that the VFX shops are going to be...
nationwide, is it? Because I thought
that
was
was
one state.
Nope. My understanding is the National Labour Relations Board are applying it across the US, much to the chagrin of like a lot of conservative fuckwats. Finally, it's not all good. There have been some downsizing, in particular the Creative Arts Agency, which is a pretty big deal over in LA. They have been downsizing as a consequence of the strikes. But yeah, so it's ongoing, it's complicated, but ultimately it comes down to whose side are you on? Are you with the workers, or are you with like Bob Iger and the other very highly paid people who, you know, wouldn't piss on you to put you out a fire? And that's it.
Bob Iger, the only more hated Bob than Bobby Kotick.
Yes. Do we have any closing thoughts here? Like, you know, that's pretty as good a comprehensive introduction as I can give to the issue.
No.
Up the workers, and fuck it. I'll take 2007 again if it means these cunts get their fucking fair pay in that.
Yeah. Yep. So
and also slay the beast, which is the AI.
So yeah, I guess that's all we can say on WGA and SAG-AFTRA and their strikes for now. We'll keep you updated if anything interesting happens. In the meantime, I think Jamie's got some comment or commentariat for us.
I didn't bother this week, actually.
Oh well. See you later.
Yeah, I have. Right, here's the first one. You can't pick up human energy in the same way. Like, the energy field is just almost not there. It's like people are holograms. It's like a city of ghosts now. You're there, you see them, but you can't feel them. People who are vaccinated have no scent anymore. You can't smell them. I'm not saying like they don't smell bad or they don't smell. Like, I'm not talking about deodorant. I'm saying they don't smell like there's a human being in the room, and they don't feel like there's a human being in the room. Comment or commentariat?
Comment, surely.
Oh, I don't know.
Alasdair, what do you think?
Commentariat.
I kind of want to take the stab at that as well. Yeah, okay. Fuck it.
I'm hoping it's comment. Please let it be comment.
It was commentariat. That was. That was. Wait till you unpick this though. That was a Guardian interview with Naomi Klein on being mistaken for Naomi Wolf. So that is something Naomi Wolf said on like a news podcast in America.
Right, all right. That's a fucking trick. Right, okay.
Yeah, it was technically both.
I'd like, okay, sure, all right.
All right, second one. Have you driven in London or anywhere else recently? If so, you'll have noticed that traffic lights simply don't work anymore, because since the advent of the smartphone, drivers are so desperate to use the queuing time to check their phones that each light only releases about half as many cars as it was programmed to. As 1 in 4 of those lined up checks to see what's happened on TikTok since the last time they checked, about 3 minutes ago, and thus misses the change, gets honked at by the furious guy behind them, panics, stalls, and nobody else gets out. Shamed, they exit the next light promptly, but within 4 cars of them, there'll be someone else desperate to see if his crap Twitter joke's been liked in the last 200 seconds, who will himself miss it, panic and stall, and the cycle goes on, infuriating. And it's all because people are afraid to check their phones while driving, which they know for sure is criminal. So here's what we do. First, we make it legal to check your phone while driving. Comment or commentariat.
What fucking Pandora's box?
This was you in another Discord.
What fucking Pandora's box have we opened by allowing Jamie to do multiple fucking comments or commentariat?
It's glorious is what it is. I'm going to go comment again. This is either comment or it's fucking Jeremy
This is deranged enough to be commentariat.
Yeah, I'm going with commentariat as well.
That was Giles Corrin in the Times.
Amazing.
How can he complain about traffic though? He doesn't have a car.
Right. I've never watched Meghan Markle in a film or series, nor have any desire to. I, with friends, celebrated Harry and her getting married. So many of us in the UK were pleased to see him happy. Not for long, though. Her disrespect to our Queen when she described how she curtsied was appalling. An example of her dreadful acting skills and the last straw. Harry should have put her in her place right then. His betrayal to the family is equally unforgivable. They deserve each other. I hope King Charles ensures that not a penny from the UK subsidises them, and I think it's only a matter of time before Netflix pulls the plug on them. Comment or commentariat.
Do you know the thing that annoys me about that whole courtesy thing is I actually, unfortunately, learned about this. She was fucking joking about herself and how she didn't know how to do a courtesy. That's what, like, she was saying, I didn't have a clue. I was, like, trying to courtesy and I did something like this. And she's making fun of herself. She wasn't making fun of the Queen. God damn it.
Okay, but have you considered that, like, her main crime was not being white while she did it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, she made a joke while black, and that's not allowed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a criminal offence. Comment? I'm free for free.
I'm going to go comment on this one.
Yeah, comment feels right in a wrong way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a comment on a GB News video about something unrelated.
Very on brand.
Right, that's it, because I had a fourth one, but if Rob's not here to get mad about wine, then I'm saving it for later.
Come back soon, Rob.
Yeah, okay. Cool. Okay, right, so closing up, Andor stuff is coming, I promise. I just haven't fucking edited it yet. I promise I will fucking release those episodes soon. You can, however, get the bonus episode, which will be out by the time this episode is out, on Patreon, patreon.com/praxiscast.
Yeah, or your money back.
No, not legally binding.
Jamie instantly curses a release to be delayed. Thanks, Jamie.
So patreon.com/praxiscast if you're not already a member. That also gets you access to the Discord. You should do that. You should join the Discord. Just post in the Discord. Discord is good. And you can see us streaming. That is twitch.tv/praxiscast Wednesdays and Thursdays from about 7:30, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, thereabouts in the evening. Yeah. And praxiscast.tmail.com for your merch requirements.
Come join us on the Discord. I like being shouted at by you about why my opinions are wrong. It's great.
Yeah, and they are wrong, and there's a lot of them, so...
Yeah, come and bully James about Skyrim sex mods.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there wasn't a stream yesterday because I was the birthday boy.
I love how you include that, Jamie, because out of context, that's going to sound fantastic. Great.
Which bit? The bit about me being a birthday boy, or the bit about you like having fucking grot mods for Skyrim?
Jesus wept, I swear to God. If you would like to understand the context of that joke and why it's not as it sounds like, please do join the Discord.
No, it is as bad as it sounds.
Yeah.
Oh my fucking God.
Bye.
1,000 yards to that time.
Bye.
Yeah, reluctantly, bye.